Last year, I had a really interesting conversation with one of my mentors as we were driving back from the airport from a work trip, talking about definitions of extroversion and introversion. So, today, I think the most popular definitions of these two is that extroverts are people who enjoy being around people, the sort of classic party person, social, likes to interact, would prefer to be with people rather than by themselves. And introverts are the opposite. They like to be by themselves. They would prefer to be alone than with others. They don't enjoy large social gatherings and so forth. And of course, like everything, it's a spectrum. Most people lay somewhere between the two. You might feel more extroverted one day than the other based on lots of factors, your sleep, what's going on in your life, and so forth. But what was interesting about this conversation is that my mentor, who is perhaps about 30 years older than I am, noted that one thing that he learned when he was working earlier in his career about extroversion and introversion is that there's also a definition around how people learn and think through things and process things kind of in a work setting, and that extroverts in this more work setting tend to excel more with dialogue with others to solve and work through problems, whereas introverts tend to excel more working on their own, quietly coming up with the solutions to their problems. And that was really fascinating to me because I view myself in the current parlance of the words extrovert, introvert. I view myself much more as an introvert. I love time by myself. I spend lots of time by myself. I don't enjoy large group gatherings usually. Networking is a bit stressful unless it's very directed. I feel like I have a role or specific people I need to go talk to. But I'm more extroverted on the work problem side, where I do find that talking with people through my problems or larger scale work problems is really helpful. And this ties into the next couple of episodes because I'm putting these out in May of 2026, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And part of what I have found incredibly helpful for myself, incredibly helpful for some people around me, is having open and honest conversations, dialogues, discussions around mental health and coming up with solutions, right? I did not really make any significant shifts in my personal mental health until I started therapy. I started therapy in, I believe, around 2021. And that was my first kind of exposure to, I have a problem internally that maybe I feel uncomfortable about. Maybe I feel some shame, some guilt, some vulnerability, whatever the uncomfortable emotions are. But here's this person that I can talk to and start working through things. So I'm really excited about these two episodes. It's a two-parter this week and next week. And I'm working with my advisor, my former PhD and master's advisor, Jeff Pierce. So I worked with Jeff between 2014 and 2019. And Jeff had and still has so many excellent qualities. He was extremely generous with his time when I worked with him. He was always available if I had questions. He was great at conferences where he did a really, really lovely job making sure I met lots of people. Again, being that introvert when it comes to these more social settings, I was very uncomfortable always at these conferences. And it helped a ton to have Jeff introduce me to people. It helped me get jobs. My first 3 jobs were essentially from networking through Jeff and his network. That being said, looking back at that time, I also was highly aware of Jeff struggling at times, and he seemed to have a pretty steady undercurrent of stress. Now, he was an assistant professor when I worked with him, which means that he was pre-tenure. So, tenure in the academic university setting certainly does give a certain level of job security and perhaps eases some people's stress when they reach that level. He also had a young child, right? These are all factors that is completely reasonable that looking back, I'm like, yeah, okay, it makes sense that he was stressed, but sometimes it seemed a bit more than that. And indeed, it was a bit more than that at times. And one of my core values is growth and, working on myself, growing, and people I'm really drawn to, gravitate towards, are people who also can demonstrate growth over time. And Jeff is one of these people where I've seen just a massive turnaround over the last few years. And it's been so great, so exciting to see. I honestly left his group feeling like, if that's what being a professor looks like, I can't do that. I can't work all the time like he seems to work all the time. And, he didn't actually work all the time. It just was the perception, right? These are the stories I was telling myself from my observations of him at the time. But he has started to become more balanced from my perception. He's focused a lot more on hobbies that bring him great joy, competitive swimming and music. He still prioritizes family. He always prioritized family. That was something I thought was really cool about him. He made sure that he spent quality time with his daughter and his wife every single day. So I think that this conversation fits in with my sort of extroversion around problems, right? Talking about mental health. And then next week, we'll return and talk about mentor and mentee relationships, which was extremely helpful to me because I am a fairly new mentor and I spend more of my time mentoring than being mentored right now, which is unusual. That's a change for me, right? Like I've spent probably a decade or more in school and in these kind of more junior roles and jobs where people were constantly mentoring me. So that change has been challenging, and it's come with realizing, I don't have a magic on-off mentor switch where I just suddenly become this awesome mentor. It's something that, just like everything else, shouldn't have been surprised by it, but maybe I was a little surprised. I have to grow. I have to acknowledge where I'm weak. I can talk to people like Jeff, like my therapist, whoever else around areas that I'm struggling with. So I'm so glad that you were here for this conversation today. As always, this is STEMdenity. This is a podcast where I believe that, we all can have incredible roles and incredible jobs in the STEM fields. But sometimes it's really hard to get there because there's things that are in the way, whether it's your own mental health challenges, whether it's, you're working in a toxic group and you don't know how to get out, or whatever it is, right? So this episode is for mental health. Next week, mentee-mentor relationships. Hopefully, no matter where you are on the spectrum of being a mentor or mentee, it's helpful for you wherever you are on your mental health journey. This is helpful for you, whether you've been working intensively for years or, you occasionally think, I feel like things could be a little better, but I'm not sure how. I hope these episodes are incredibly helpful, and please enjoy getting to meet someone who really has helped me a vast amount in my life, Dr. Jeff Pierce. Dr. Jeff Pierce, my advisor, now my colleague. I am so glad to have you on the podcast. I've known you since I was thinking back, and I guess I came out in kind of springish, Marchish of 2014 for my visit to Colorado State University in the atmospheric science department. You had invited me out. I got to actually tour the same day that the person who ended up being my office mate throughout most of grad school toured. So it was a really fun day. And I remember being, kind of confused because I still wasn't really sure what grad school was, but really excited because, it was a great opportunity. And I got to go to Denver afterwards and see Sharon Jones sing, which was amazing at one of
Did you really?
I did. I'm
I
sure
feel
you've
like
seen my Sharon Jones and the Dap King sweatshirt because I still have that thing.
I'm surprised I don't remember that just because I was a Sharon Jones fan at the time. I'm still.
Yeah. Then the best part was that my birthday happened. And so I saw her on my birthday and we were in line to, have her sign merch or whatever. And I was just like, I'm so excited to see you. It's my birthday. And I was like the last person in line. And she's saying like 15 seconds of happy birthday to me. So
That's awesome.
that will
That's
go
so
down.
great.
Yeah. One
Well,
of my
that's
best memories.
probably helped you convince you to come.
Yeah. It didn't hurt. So when I got out here in 2014, I kind of vaguely was aware that you had started at CSU about a year earlier and that you were previously at Dalhousie, somewhere in Canada. My geography is quite bad, but you can tell us where it is in Canada. But, I slowly pieced together your journey through grad school to becoming a professor over the years. But maybe you can kind of give the overview of, when did you start to see this path for becoming a professor open up for you?
Yeah, sure. So I went to undergrad at Northeastern University in Boston. and I majored in chemical engineering. And I had done research in a lab there, not on anything related to the atmosphere. But I liked that enough that I applied to grad schools in chemical engineering, not really knowing what I wanted to do for research. But when I toured Carnegie Mellon University, where I ended up going to graduate school, they had air pollution research, or some professors doing air pollution research in the chemical engineering department, and that excited me. In hindsight, I probably should have been applying for graduate schools based on environmental research, but it all worked out. So I went to Carnegie Mellon for my PhD, also in chemical engineering. Um, I'm now an atmospheric science professor, so I was doing research that involved the atmosphere. There wasn't a ton of classes on atmospheric science, so I ended up reading a lot to learn about that. So at least to make me well equipped enough to one day fake it as an atmospheric science professor. Um, After I finished at Carnegie Mellon, I did a postdoc for 1 year at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, followed by a professor position first at Dalhousie University, which is in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So all the way east coast of hanging off of Maine, bit of a peninsula. And I was there for 3.5 years before coming to Colorado State University in atmospheric science. And I should mention that Dalhousie was physics and atmospheric science was the department. So still basically an atmospheric scientist there. So I started, yeah, January 2013. You started in the summer of 2014. So yeah, I'd only been here for about a year when you visited, and a bit longer when you showed up that first summer.
Yeah, I actually think that's really interesting. I know all the pieces, but I hadn't heard them said that way, and I want to kind of call out a couple things of like, you two were at grad school, but you didn't really know what research you wanted to do, and I think that's startlingly common, especially for people who go from undergrad to grad school. And I was even in a conversation the other day with some of the, I want to say they're assistant deans, and we have 4 of them in the College of Engineering, which is confusing, but I don't know, some level um, of that staff at our university, and they were saying, yeah, we kind of hear all the time from our undergraduates that they don't really know what grad school is, they don't understand it, and I am not surprised because I also didn't know what grad school was, but I'm also a little baffled that that's still the case, that there isn't just some, I don't know, 1 credit hour class or something, right? Something kind of in place at universities, especially research universities like ours that have really strong graduate programs, to say, this is what grad school looks like. It doesn't look the same for everyone. Everyone's going to have a unique experience, but there's some unique, there's some common themes across the board.
It is a good idea. I do think the students that get into RU programs first, they need to know to apply for RU programs. But
Right. Can you
the
define what
ones,
that is for?
sorry. Research experiences for undergrads, NSF funded summer programs where departments across the country will host, I don't know, eight to 12 students to focus on research in a specific area that department is strong in. And in that part of the experience of doing research during that is they're also supposed to be mentored on what the process of research in graduate school is like. And so they have professional development on it and to help prepare them. So I think those students probably do get better information than you and I did. But they also had to be mentored well enough in undergrad to know to apply to these programs, which I didn't know what it was. I remember getting to graduate school and having people tell me they did these REU programs, and they had to explain to me what it was. So thanks for reminding me to not just use acronyms.
Of course, it's the bane of science and engineering. Yeah, I didn't know either what an REU was, and I dabbled in, like, I don't know, semi research in undergrad, but not really. And it was kind of just a decision of, well, I don't really know what else to do with myself, and I'm really good at school, and I guess grad school is a thing. So my major blessing in my life, honestly, was just showing an interest in air pollution and having my capstone project undergraduate advisor just look at me one day and say, have you ever thought about going into atmospheric science? And I said, no, I don't know what that is. And then I read the Wikipedia article on it and then was like, okay, this sounds like a much better fit than the physics programs I'm applying to at the time. So I just, changed the words from physics to atmospheric science on my ongoing applications at the moment. retweets
Bet I
my
couldn't tell.
comment. Yeah, I mean, it was such a I have those moments in my life. I can count them on, one or two hands, but where something is just such a strong yes that I don't even question it. I'm like, okay, this is what I do now. I am now becoming an atmospheric scientist, which I'm really grateful for because there's plenty of times where I'm indecisive and have a hard time kind of steering myself around. So I was in your research group for 5 years, 2014 to 2019. And through that time, I'm interested in people. I care about people. I'm very observant of people. And if I were to have to describe you in one word during that period, it would be stressed. If I'm being very honest, where you seemed happy, you were very excited about the research, but man, you worked long hours, you were always responsive, always on email, always on top of things, and it seemed really stressful. And then you started this a little bit while I was with the group, but then since then, you've been working on your mental health and also opening up a lot about that, talking to students, giving presentations, which I think is so, so important, right? Like again, just like how I'm a little surprised that it's not that common that undergraduates understand what grad school is as an option. I'm still a little surprised when, talking about mental health and therapy is still a novel concept. I'm like, I feel like this should just be normalized by now. I go to therapy, I talk about it. I think it's great, but it's not normalized in many settings. But I think the atmospheric science department as a whole is very progressive on that front from what I've seen. But maybe backing up before we talk about, the experiences you've had speaking with others about it is, when did you kind of start noticing that struggle come in? When did you realize that you couldn't do this all on your own? And did you even have like some sort of healthy baseline to reference and be like, I used to feel totally fine. And now I feel, because I feel like I actually kind of had a weird opposite journey where undergrad was my most stressful period of my life. Like I worked 10 to 12 hours consistently. And then I came to grad school and I just said, I don't want to do that. Like I don't, I'm going to work 40 hours a week. Like that's what I can put in. I can't keep killing myself. And that was before I started therapy, but that was at least a big shift in just sort of my own personal boundaries.
Yeah, you're particularly by the end, it seemed like you had, to me, it seemed like you had many things figured out in terms of boundaries and what your priorities were and what you valued and not being thrown off by things that are outside of like your core values. So
Mm.
yeah, it was impressive to view how you handled things in graduate school. Very mature. Yeah, so your question. So I think the times I've struggled have all centered around fear of failure taking over. And I want to like make that a theme because I think people who are listening who have struggled, that will probably resonate. Since I sense, if there's anxiety, depression around academia, I would guess that that's a fear of failure. Fear of failure is an element in many cases. The first time it really seemed to hit me bad enough that I wanted to do something about it was a time period during graduate school. Maybe in my fourth or fifth year, and I just for some reason felt like, and I don't necessarily know what it was, but I just felt like I wasn't good enough, and I don't know what it was that I wasn't good enough for. But that feeling kind of took over, and I went to the therapist at the university a couple times, and then I don't know how much the therapist directly helped versus maybe other things shifting or something, but I kind of came out of that, and it was fairly short, maybe a month. Um, and then it hit really hard in my postdoc. And so at the end of graduate school, I applied for faculty positions and postdocs at the same time. And I got and lined up both at the same time. So I knew I was going to be going to Dalhousie University after a 1 year postdoc at NASA. And that gave me essentially a year to ruminate on all the things that could go wrong being a professor without actually being able to start and do anything with them. And so particularly, and also with my postdoc, I moved away from my partner, now my wife, um, who was like the center of my social support. And so I was on my own. I did have some friends in the area of Washington, D.C. that I could see, but I didn't have a ton of really close friends at NASA yet. And so that I was particularly vulnerable then, not having the same level of social support that I did. And then having this fear of like, oh gosh, like I need to write proposals now. I got to teach a class. I need to advise a student and they need to like get papers out. They need to, all these things. And it was just, I could not comprehend how I could actually succeed at all of those things. It just seemed way too likely in my brain that at least one of them would fail and this whole thing was going to come crashing down. Um, and so I saw a therapist then for several months. And I think what ultimately ended up helping is that I was able to start writing proposals during my postdoc for Dalhousie. And I started making more, like I started having closer friendships at NASA. And so I felt that social support there. And I eventually kind of came out of that in probably after about 6 months, I would say. And then there was a short period at the start of Dalhousie where my partner was still finishing her PhD, and so she hadn't come out yet. And again, the fear of failure kind of took over, and that was short. So those were like three times I recognized it, but didn't hit as hard as later, which we'll get to. And so then you asked about healthy baseline, and so what I came up with this was sort of it was baseline and it was healthy for the conditions I was in. And so I think this is important because I think what is a healthy mode of operation can change as your situation changed. So once I got settled at Dalhousie and I sort of felt like I had ticked the boxes, I had taught my first class, I had a good mentoring relationship with my first students. I felt like accepted there. I felt like the science was moving forward. I became quite comfortable, but I was working very hard. My partner and I did not have any children yet, and so she was doing a postdoc there. I was a professor. We would come home and I would work, and she's always been really good at working less hard than me, or working the right amount of hard. So she would not work at night, but she would knit, or and it was just pleasant, and I could work too many hours. But the thing is, I still could go to the gym. I still was hanging out with my wife. I still had friends I could see, but because I didn't have a child yet, it worked, and I generally for that whole time period I was very happy. But so healthy, yes, but what is the problem is it is unhealthy because it is unsustainable under different situations. So Ellen was my partner was pregnant when we moved and started at Colorado State University. Um, so my daughter was born after 5 months of moving here, and I really wanted to be a dad that was present. And so I didn't want to be working if it was after 5 and my daughter was still awake. So I was that time, I lost that time, right? And it's good, a good reason to lose that time. But what hadn't changed yet was realizing that I should reduce the amount of time I worked, or like at least the expectations for output or all the things I do. So for several years, I operated in this mode where I was trying to still do as much work as I did before, but but also being a dad. And I think that took time, but eventually caught up with me. And I think this is what you were describing of me seeming stressed early on when you started. And this is another thing to talk about, like it's relevant whether or not you have job security or not. I did not have tenure at the start of that, of you being in graduate school. And so the fear of failure, and I just did not recognize that I did not have to be doing as much as I was doing. Um, Certainly at the start, I had a good trust in the group members, but I didn't take advantage of that in the right way, where I should have just been like, I know they're working hard, and I know, we're meeting weekly and they're going to do good work. But so I was, probably spending too much time thinking about their projects
Mhm.
and thinking, and maybe like thinking about too much about what they had to do next as opposed to letting them figure that out. So there's a lot of things that like easily could have been released at that point. Um, for a while, I was still trying to write my own papers, which eventually stopped doing. But that wasn't really necessary. That could have been dropped sooner. Um, and this is something I want to actually, I'm going to do a digression here. For young professors, maybe your department will like be judging you on first author papers, but I have really strong opinions about that because I think a mentee authored paper should count more than a professor first author paper towards tenure or whatnot. Because not only is it from science ideas in your group, you are also mentoring a student to be able to write and so that they can continue to contribute to science in the future. So not only, yeah, did that paper come out of your group, but you also like grew a scientist in doing that. So we need a change in any tenure and promotion process that mentee author papers count more than professor first author papers. And that's something I noticed here in CSU that's gradually changed in my time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point. And I mean, it ties right back into what you're saying, which, I'll reword it how I'm hearing it, which is that both grad students and professors have very squishy metrics, which we must somehow magically achieve, right? And we're going to talk more in a bit about mentor-mentee relationships because turns out both parties in that list are humans and they're not perfect. And it's really hard and it's challenging. And, just like I'm sure many people listening have heard something along the lines of professors kind of being like, well, we weren't really trained to do basically anything that we do. Like we're not trained to teach. We're not trained to advise. Sometimes we get some training around proposal writing. It kind of depends. We're sort of trained to do research and that's about it. And we're also really trained how to take a class. Like we're excellent class takers, other than that. And yeah, I mean, I had my annual review actually this week and I was feeling fine. I was feeling fine. I was feeling fine. The review was on Tuesday. Monday, suddenly intrusive thought pops in. Hey, what if you get fired tomorrow? And I was like, I don't think I'm going to get fired, but and then that thought was just like, well, last year was bad. We lost a bunch of funding through the federal situation and didn't get any papers out really, other than about one or two. And it just started chewing on because I didn't have a rubric, right? And being a grad student, a pre-tenure professor working towards tenure, it really feels like one of those, you know what, when you see it kind of situations where people are like, oh yeah, you've done enough things. And I'm like, okay, could I do less things? Could I do more things? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is wild how those thoughts take over. Thanks for sharing that because that's just a really good example of how easy it is to fall into those thought traps. I'm not even sure you legally can be fired, but yet that doesn't prevent you from having those thoughts.
I looked back at my contract actually, and there is a line in it that says something like, it's a yearly appointment provided the annual reviews are satisfactory. So I don't know if
Okay.
that's a new thing, but I think
So
there's
maybe that, yeah, I sort of, I don't know if that's how it's always been. I sort of operate on that. Yeah, generally faculty get their pre-tenure period
yeah.
to see what happens. But
Yeah, it's
okay,
a little
yeah,
unclear. But I mean, maybe the advice to the listeners, rather than me just sort of complaining about my own, experience, is when you're in these squishy positions, still be trying to get, as if you need concreteness to feel a little more confident, then still be trying to get at something that looks concrete. I think if I had gone to my department head and said earlier than the review and had said, hey, I don't really feel like last year was very productive or this time period was very productive. This is what I got done. I think he could have talked me through. And if I was falling off the track, he would have steered me back, right? These once a year things are maybe not quite frequent enough if you don't really know what's being expected of you to keep you on track. So, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that as well.
just in terms of how to handle the annual reviews, is that what you're saying?
Or no, just when you're in a position, whether it's a faculty position or grad student position that just doesn't have clear guidelines around what's expected,
Sorry, yeah.
how do you push to get a little bit more feedback without just sort of sitting there?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Ideally, like your department is giving you good written feedback every year that can help, but yet in your first early years, you haven't gotten much of that yet. So seek out mentors in your department. Um, Ideally, a department will have something in place to like assign you mentors or have something set up, but if that doesn't exist, try to find the I guess more senior faculty that have that experience that you're comfortable going to and that they're receptive for those questions. Um, and in atmospheric science, we have this set up, but I do find that the newer faculty tend to go to all the professors, or many of the professors for advice. There's like some new professors in the department that tend to ask a lot of questions, which is great. And so maybe that's just the culture of the department, but I think, yeah, asking, like trying to find mentors that you can go to for these questions. Yeah.
No, I think that's good advice. And, my department's a little more dispersed. We're kind of scattered to the wind. So it feels more imposing to reach out. Like I'm, using their precious time, but I also know that they're not going to say no and they're going to be grateful that I'm always grateful when people seek out mentoring, mentee advice. So it's just something I'm a little uncomfortable and still moving towards, but we kind of got off track. So
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah. So I
back
did start with
on.
I started the
So
digression. It's
yeah,
all good.
this is why I have notes, because otherwise I just, I can talk about anything forever. So walking back to that mental health journey, and there's these kind of ups and downs. And you said, okay, you started working with a therapist kind of on and off, but what were some of the things that you found helpful?
Before we get to that, I actually haven't even finished the journey of even ultimately getting to a therapist.
Absolutely.
The as a faculty member, after a few years post having a child, I I didn't piece it together, but like I can think back in hindsight at just times where I started being overly sensitive and getting upset with people about things that like clearly were not things to worry about a few different times. So if I started here in 2013, I can think back on instances in 2016 where that happened, where I'm like, I look back, I'm like, oh, that was like so silly of me to handle that way. But then really in 2018, something really hit, and I don't know. I mean, I think there's a number of things contributing at the same time. I was injured, so I'm a swimmer, and that's one of my mental health outlets. And so I was unable to swim. My partner was teaching a study abroad class for 2 weeks um, in Ecuador, so she was away. I was single parenting, which generally is not an issue, but I didn't have that support. Um, but somehow during that period when she was away, I became what seemed at the time to be irreversibly sensitive, where whatever anybody said, or I was thinking of it, interpreting it the worst possible way. And, my thoughts were often ruminating on things and whatnot. And so this was like a month or two in like late spring 2018. I think by midsummer, maybe I was a little bit better. And then I started having a mentor-mentee issue that would have been a challenging situation had I been in the right headspace. And it certainly, if I had had the training around what to do in that type of situation, I could probably, I certainly would have done a better job. But I think what ended up happening is because I felt like the mentor-mentee relationship was failing, this made me more depressed and made me more sensitive, which hurt the mentor-mentee relationship more, which made me more depressed. And by this point, I was so sensitive that my trust in my group, like the other group members, I lost it, and for completely no reason, no fault of theirs. And such, then it was kind of affecting things more broadly. At least that's how I sensed it in my brain. And that made me more stressed and more sensitive. So I finally, so during this whole period, I was not talking to any colleagues about it because I just felt like I was failing, and I felt like I should be able to fix things, and I didn't want people to know I was failing. It was just like the worst possible decision making I was making at that point. But eventually, I got myself to talk to one colleague who's at my career stage, and we're most more at this point mostly talking about the mentor-mentee relationship. And they would just help me talk through things, talked about similar situations they'd been in, how they handled it, um, empathized. So I think that made me feel like I was not alone. And so that was good. And then I talked to a more senior mentor about it. And again, like similar kind of reception where I came away feeling better rather than them judging me. People probably say this all the time, but also I'll say it again. It's like, don't wait to talk to people when you're having struggling, even if it's about the specific situation. At this point, I wasn't talking to them about depression, but one of the two did recommend their therapist for me. And so then I did start talking to that therapist weekly, I believe, at that point. That was helping. But, maybe a few weeks or a month into that, I like ended up being sensitive and getting upset at a different student and for no good reason. And at that point, I made a appointment with my medical doctor to talk about antidepressants. And so I went on antidepressants at that point. So, and I think that that started to help. But ultimately, like one of the hardest things about coming out of this was that I was being sensitive and acting certain ways in the time that it was happening. And then after the fact, I was then feeling guilty and feeling like I had lost the students' trust. And so then I was like not confident at work because I didn't know what people thought about me anymore. It made it like I think I was like doing better, but at the same time, I didn't feel confident at work anymore. And so that was maybe the theme of 2019 for me, where like I don't think I was like depressed in the same way, but I didn't feel like myself either. I was continuing to see the therapist, continue to take the antidepressants, still do. Like I actually did try coming off of them in 2019 and I got sensitive again. And so I went back on them. Wellbutrin, it's been great for me. So the one thing that finally hit that allowed everything to fully reset, and I feel bad saying this because I know this is such a hard time for so many people, but it was a blessing for me, was the COVID lockdown. And so it just kind of put like we didn't know it was going to happen, particularly early on, right? And it's just like all of my work trips got canceled, and it was just like expectations on how I needed to perform and stuff. I just somehow just let go of. I all the meetings went to Zoom. I couldn't see how my students were working, so I had to learn to trust them again fully. And so that reset, and the students during the COVID time were amazing. And so it just helped me be like, oh yeah, I don't know why I was stressing about them getting things done. That students who make it to grad school are by and large extremely self-motivated and deserve to be treated that way. Coming out of COVID, and as we started going back to work, I had by that point started reprioritizing. And maybe this is what your follow-up question was. Yeah, do you want to just ask it or yeah?
Yeah, like, in order to, because you've sort of brought up this theme already of, sure, everything was great when you were working a bunch before you had a child, but also you were working so much that the second something changed in that environment, it was all going to fall apart.
Yeah.
So what have you kind of done over time to make your job sustainable? Because, you I think you've alluded to this, this is your forever job, right? As far as you can tell,
Yeah.
you're going to be, it might not be CSU forever, I don't know, but you're going to be a professor. That's what you want to do. And that's not whatever, some people want to bounce around, but if you're going to have a forever job, well, it better be sustainable. What have you managed to figure out over time? And I'm sure it's still an ongoing process, making things more sustainable.
So I think what I was figuring out over COVID and coming back, that I think all of us, I mean, certainly me, but all of us want to feel like we're having some sort of impact or we are valued in what we do. And I think prior to COVID, when I was like stressed about work, I thought that had to come from the broader research community being like, oh yeah, like Jeff will give a great talk on this. He keeps doing great work, publishing so many papers. I thought that's where my value had to come from. But I realize it's much easier to feel valued and like I'm making a difference if I just focus on the students in my group or the mentees in my group and their growth as well as like teaching well, just because you can see their growth. You can if you give some analogy in class or something and someone asks a follow-up question, some student asks a follow-up question about it, showing that they got it and they're thinking one step further. It's this sort of like instant feedback that what you just did counted and was helpful to someone. And so I've shifted towards using that to seek my value, find my value at work. And so it's much more local, just here at CSU. And I because COVID stopped us from traveling, I choose to travel to far fewer conferences since then. I mean, at this point I have tenure, so it's easier to make that decision. So I think I've like yeah, I've come become much more local in my scope, and that's helped a ton because it's easier to see that value and keep happiness. And I think yeah, if you know that you're helpful and you have value, then it's easier to stay happy.
Yeah. Yeah. I I'm really taken aback by that advice. That's so good because I think it's so easy for doesn't matter what your field is. If I say name 3 giants in your field, you can name 3 giants in your field. And we have no idea how they got to where they are. And there's no reason why none of us listening won't become a giant someday. But is that if that's your only focus, if that's your only goal, what happens if you're not a giant in your field? Then where is your happiness at? I know there's the saying, and I'm gonna get the saying wrong, but it's like think global, act local. And that's kind of what I feel like you're doing because you have no idea what impact your local quote unquote actions are going to have in the long
Yep.
run. I think it's the same idea of doing something good in your community, and all of a sudden your community is a little better, and then you don't know how that's going to spiral outwards. Because I mean, I don't really have ambitions of becoming the best in whatever it is I do because I don't even really know what I do research wise, right? I do one thing right now, but I'm like, in 3 years, I guarantee you it's going to be a different thing. So that's who I am. I like bouncing around in research. I don't settle down easily, but I do have this starting this platform, and maybe it's always going to be 10 people listening to it, but maybe someday it's actually going to really make an impact. But I also don't know that if those 10 people listening and hey, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. I hope you're enjoying this, you could go off and change the world because of one thing, one of my awesome guests said or something someday, right? So you just having grandiose goals, you might get there someday, but it doesn't seem like a lot of those people are that happy on that path. They reach the grandiose goal and you're like, are they happy right now? I can't tell. You know, what can you focus
Yeah.
on that is like truly growing before your eyes?
Yeah. No, thanks for rephrasing that and summarizing it. Like one thing I think that where faculty may be prone to this is that in order to get a faculty position, typically you have to be very productive as yourself in terms of research, in terms of like giving great talks, publishing papers that people are reading, creating at least some sort of buzz about you. And so you get in that mindset of like, this is what it takes to get a faculty position. And even being on the, now on the side where I'm looking at, hiring faculty and, hiring committees and those sorts of things. And I think probably the ones that have that viewpoint for themselves during that period leading into a faculty position, probably the ones that more likely, come to the top of the pile on that, which is unfortunate. And so I think a lot of times if faculty are unable to sort of temper that on their own, they may end up struggling and may need to reprioritize.
Yeah. And something I know you wanted to touch on is that sort of pre-tenure mindset versus post-tenure mindset. And for people who are listening who are like, I'm not going to become a professor, there's probably going to be jobs where you're quite junior and you don't feel very secure, and then someday there's more senior positions where you have a lot more job security. So I think these lessons kind of apply across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I say like how I changed my priorities in terms of just focusing locally, and this freed up more time for me to work less and whatnot. And that's easy to say because at the time I was doing that, I had tenure, and in fact, as I was transitioning during it, I was moving towards full professor. So that probably was the last promotion of my life. So there isn't like bars to shoot for now, but it's what's tricky is that I think I and probably many other faculty should be doing this value searching and switching, take pressure off of themselves and prevent yourselves from getting depressed pre-tenure. Because if you're stressed, you're depressed, and you're not having fun, what it's probably maybe it's not the best job for you at the time. I don't know, like, but I think a lot of people, and that maybe this goes back to what you're saying earlier about needing to get the feedback from your department about what they're actually looking for to get tenure, because I think most of us were so worried about this fuzzy bar with some error bars on it because we don't know exactly where it is, that we end up shooting way above it because we want to make sure we're above the error bars on where that bar is. And we push ourselves too hard at that stage when I think by and large we would get tenure even if we gave ourselves some grace during that period.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think that the university process as a whole moves at this sort of glaciated pace, and sometimes departments can be a little more nimble, but having conversations like this to just say, hey, if you are in these positions, can you nudge the people who are more senior than you to give you a little bit more of a guideline? Speaking of acting locally, wouldn't it be a miracle if there started to crop up departments here and there that just had, here's your tenure guidelines, here's your guidelines as a grad student, all of these sort of set things. Like I have, I'm right now trying to figure out what is my vacation policy for my graduate students. And I'm like, I shouldn't have to figure this out. This should be a policy by the university. It is ridiculous that they do not have official vacation beyond the university holidays. So I think there's a lot of growth that we all do as individuals, and there's a lot of growth in the university system that is hopefully going to happen over time.
Yeah, we have it now, vacation policy for students in the department, but yeah, it should be more normalized to have that everywhere. I think one of the things that's actually challenging about the tenure process is that we do want to communicate where the bar is, but the problem is we don't want it to be one size fits all. We want people to be able to grow and succeed as a professor whose strengths are in service and outreach. We want ones whose strengths are in teaching, ones whose strengths are in research, and we don't want to, say if you are putting most of your resources into this and you're doing an amazing job with it and it creates tons of value for the department, that you're not going to get tenure. So I think that maybe makes it a little bit harder to be prescriptive, but maybe there's ways still to give guidelines within multiple areas.
No, that's a really good point. And I think like my, my calm, wise self understands and actually thrives in that environment, because I'm like, yeah, I am really good at certain things that other people are not good at. And that's super cool. My anxiety selves, however, are like, they want something more concrete. So, and I mean, this is why we're having a mental health conversation. How do you sort of get to a place where you're like, I am just good at what I'm good at. And if it's not good enough for the people around me, then that's my cue to move on and go somewhere else. And that's a hard place to get to, but it is possible. And I know that, mental health, just like physical health, right? It's not sort of a one and done. You don't kind of, pop a therapy every few months and you're good to go. It's a daily thing. It's a routine thing. Maybe we can spend a couple minutes on, what are the things that you've found really helpful for your mental health routine?
I've really taken to breathing and box breathing and
I love the cyclic
fully
sigh. I don't know if you do
inhaling.
that one or the physiological sigh.
The what
It's
sigh?
either the cyclic sigh or the physiological sigh. It's called both.
Oh, someone was talking about the physiological sigh at a meeting I was just at, but I can't remember
Yeah,
what
it's
it
the
was. Is it where it's just
It's the
audible?
inhale through the nose and then one more short through the nose and then
Oh, yeah,
slow
that,
exhale through the
yeah,
mouth. I love that one. Yeah,
yeah,
talk.
yeah. It is amazing how well
Yeah,
that works for just calming things down. So I find doing that a lot. I sometimes do it while driving, and then sometimes I get a little lightheaded because I'm like cycling
yeah.
too slow. So I need to be careful. Yeah, that's a fantastic one. Exercise,
You're a
of
fantastic
course.
swimmer. You mentioned, but I know you compete and you do really well.
Thank you. Yeah. The tricky thing with that, as I brought up earlier, is like my worst depression was coincided with an injury there. So it is useful to diversify your hobbies so that you aren't so only have like one, which at that point I think I had like one hobby, playing music. And music is amazing. And I've noticed it with, so we have a band in our department, and I've noticed it with some of the others in the band that they're just seem to improve like their happiness as well as mine, and we've had conversations about that since we started playing music together. And I know that's one of your hobbies
Yeah.
as well.
It also helps my confidence. I know I would not be as good a speaker as I am, and I'm not like the best, but I'm in the top levels because the bar is not high at engineering conferences, if we're being honest. And I know that a lot of that comes just from being on stage and performing a lot. I'm just like, oh, this is just another performance, and you have to entertain the audience. Of course, they're going to get bored and not pay attention if you're boring. So that's my natural mindset from all that music with other areas of my life. Same with teaching. Now it's just okay, teaching is a performance. Let's go.
Right, totally. Yeah, it's music is, yeah, very helpful in many different ways for growth and confidence. Another thing I do, this is just an idea I had. I have a little clear envelope thing that you could stick a small piece of paper in on my door, and I have a little purple card. And if I feel like I'm feeling sensitive that day, like my feelings, like I would feel like when I was depressed, I put a purple card on my door, and I need to send another email around because when I first started doing it, I emailed the floor and let people know what that meant. And I'm not sure what turnover if everybody knows. It is just something where I'm like letting people know that I'm working through things, and I want to have good interactions that day, and I'm working on it. And I feel like by doing that, it reminds me to work on it and just recognize it. And I think that that helps me come out of that sensitive feeling for whatever reason. And just knowing that when I like first emailed my floor about it, they're like, "This is a great idea," and the professors were like, "Oh, really great to normalize this for the students that we should be sharing when we're having a hard day." And I don't want it to be like something where it's like I put the purple card up so I could be a jerk to you today, right? Like I want to put the purple card up and then actually like do better. Just let people know that I'm working through something, and I think that's worked well for, yeah, just having it be out there that I go through these cycles. See if I have anything else.
I haven't heard that before. I really like that. It's so, again, like your colleagues were saying, it's so humanizing and just normalizes like we don't all have really good days. And I tend to, later in my career, I've managed to sort of surround myself with mentors who seem to only have good days. And it's very disconcerting sometimes. I'm like, I don't know how you do this. Like, I'm volatile, I'm up, I'm down. I'm sure they have bad days, but somehow they manage, and they do tend to be somewhat older than both of us. So I don't know if that's just kind of their socialization where they're like, you do not show if you're having a bad day. You just show up as you are. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not you.
Yeah, wow.
Have bad days.
Yeah, that is interesting. I, yeah, I mean, yeah, we both know people that are able to bulldoze through those things and push on, but yeah, it's different personalities.
Definitely. Yeah, those are good. Do you have other ones you want to share?
I think that was what I've been thinking about. Oh yeah, and just generally, being this is related to the purple card, but like being open about my past and current struggles. Somehow, I think just talking about it and knowing that people know and didn't judge me on it makes it easier for me to not be sensitive. I don't know what it is about that, but just being like, okay, like the people around me, that's my team. If I'm a little off, like they'll have my back, because they already know, and somehow having that safety makes it easier to not feel sensitive.
Yeah. And I mean, I could imagine for people listening, a lot of people, probably a little more on the junior side, this might sound like a good idea, but not a safe idea, right? Like you're just, you don't have, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter why, you don't feel like if I told my whole group that it's not a good day, like that's gonna hurt me somehow down the road. But do you have like one person in your group or your circle that you can just sort of say, hey,
Yeah.
you know, I'm having a bad day right now. Just wanted to, I just needed to say that and just see how it goes, right? Like one trusted person is still helpful, more helpful than zero trusted people.
Yeah.
Because I get it. Like I have, my mom is a really wonderful person. And for whatever reason, that's one of those relationships where if I'm in a bad mood at anything, like I will be snipey at her. But if I actually say, hey, I'm in a bad mood, it kind of eases that and makes me feel like, all right, we've addressed the elephant in the mood. Elephant in the mood? Yeah, sure. Elephant in the room. It's okay. And then I start to be better, right? Just kind of acknowledging like this isn't my best moment and I know I'm not behaving the best actually really does sort of shift things. I don't know why it is either, right? I'm sure there's been studies or there needs to be a study on that, but I can definitely agree that that is really helpful. So I know we've hit on, yeah,
But yeah, actually, I have follow up on that because I appreciate you actually reframing it that it should that finding support around you can take many shapes. Because I actually like as you were talking about it, I want to acknowledge I'm a full professor and a white male, and so I'm probably in the situation where I can talk about my mental health struggles without fear of bad things happening from that better than people in different situations. So I think the fact that you were like, okay, yeah, it doesn't have to be everyone. You just find your person is really important. That everybody necessarily would feel comfortable like telling everyone.
yeah. And over time things always change, right? So people might realize at one point like, oh, I actually have this group around me that I can share more broadly, but until you feel that that is a safe thing to do, you don't have to run into this, do what feels comfortable. So we've spent a lot of time already kind of talking about advice for students, for faculty, for people wanting to stay in academia and otherwise. But is there anything else you want to touch on before we kind of switch over to the mentor-mentee discussion?
Yeah, there's one thing, I like talking to the incoming students about this. I think we have a tendency, at least for the people who are in academia, probably humans more generally, to view our colleagues or people around us. So say you're a new student in graduate school and you're all of a sudden in this group of students who are all at the top of their class, like you probably were, and you're in these classes with them and you see like their strengths. In any class, they're speaking up when they know what they're talking about. And if they don't know what they're talking about, then they don't say, they're less. So it's easy to create a super student by combining the strengths of all the people around you. Or if you're a new faculty, it's easy to create a super faculty member. So for me, I would see one faculty that's like really good at leading field campaigns, another one that's really good at creating outreach events, professional development activities, another faculty that's really good at like coming up with new theories and writing their own papers on it. And it's like, so, in my brain, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing these things, and I'm comparing myself to this amalgamation of my colleagues. And then it's really easy for that fear of failure to ramp up. So avoid doing that at all costs and just remember, try to take a step back and be like, yes, this person is amazing at this thing, but then they're also not doing this other thing that this other professor is doing, and they're not doing this thing that I'm doing. And so just remember that everybody has strengths and weaknesses around you, and don't just combine everyone's strengths into one.
Yeah, that's really good advice because I mean I fall into that trap. I can get out of that trap pretty easily, but I can fall into it pretty easily where I start comparing myself and I'm like, well, I don't do this, I don't do that. And then I'm like, yeah, but I do these things over here. And again, if I truly don't add enough value, at some point someone's going to tell me and I either have to change or get a new job. But until that happens, I guess I'm adding enough value.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all I wanted to say on that. That's yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I like to have a song of the week at the end of my episodes. I usually sort of bury it somewhere in the, thanks for listening, share with a friend, da da da. It's sort of like a fun surprise. But one thing that you and I really bonded on early and, continue to talk about, and occasionally I would joke, and this is half joke, half serious, that if Jeff comes into my office and I don't really have anything to show him research wise, I could just distract him with music and, we'll still have a conversation. Yep. So I'd like to invite to you, if you have a song or an album or an artist that you're super stoked on right now, do you have a song of the week that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I thought that was where I was going, so I was scrambling really quickly.
Yeah.
The song that I've been listening to a ton, so it's Love Takes Miles by Cameron Winter. He's the singer of the band Geese, which is Geese was on SNL a little bit and was like super polarizing because he sings really weird. And I think a lot of people were turned off by it that like don't know them, but I find it super endearing. And so this is like from his solo record. I just find the song so catchy and endearing. But and I just put it on a mix for my wife. Okay. So yeah, that's my song of the week. Yeah, that's Love Takes Miles by Cameron Winter.
I like it. And I'll add my song of the week is actually inspired by you. So one of the things that you were really into, I'm assuming you still are, is, the sort of Funkadelic and Parliament era style music. And a friend just turned me on to Flea, who's the bass player from Red Hot Chili Peppers, does some solo stuff. And he just put out an album in 2026, Honora, and he covered Maggot Brain. And it is an excellent cover. I don't remember if that's Funkadelic or Parliament, to be honest. You probably know, but
Funkadelic. Yeah.
But it was such a fun little cover. So I'll text it to you so you can.
I'm already on.
Perfect.
Oh wow, this is all covers.
Yeah, I really
or at least I'm looking through. It's like Wichita Lineman, Think About You. I'm guessing that's Frank Ocean.
Yep, it is.
Wow, awesome. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's a cool album. Awesome. All right. I hope you really found that conversation to be as helpful and enjoyable as I did. So many good pieces in the episode. Maybe my learn and move your feet, which is, again, we learned a lot of things. We heard a lot of things. What's at least one piece we can put into action right now is thinking through, is there someone that you work with? I'll think through, is there someone I work with? Maybe just one person that I can share with that, hey, I'm actually having an extra bad day today, and just getting that out there, just being able to say that to one person can lighten that load. I personally maybe am not quite in a place where I'd feel even that comfortable with the purple card idea. I loved it. I think it's a great idea. I'm also honestly not in the office enough for people to even get it, right? I have 2 different offices plus my home office. So, it would probably just be confusing more than helpful for others. But being able to have that one person to just be like, hey, everything's fine, but also I'm having a bad day. And that's that. And maybe that leads into a conversation. Maybe it just leads into I'm sorry you're having a bad day. I'm here if you need me, reach out. You might even find, if there's not someone you directly work with, maybe a friend that you can text would be really helpful. I actually quite like that idea, especially for days that I'm working from home and I just want someone who, has a similar job to me that I can just say, hey, having a bad day, and maybe 1 or 2 sentences on what's going on. So I mentioned at the beginning, this is a 2-parter. It's in the title, right? Next week, we're talking about mentor-mentee relationships. I'm really excited for it. As always, this podcast is not affiliated with my research and teaching roles at Colorado State University, but it's part of my belief that we can all have jobs we can love, and we all should have jobs that we love, right? We spend a lot of time. Many of us spend years, if not decades, in school working towards something that should be amazing, and we are doing work that can have the ability to impact the world. So why not love it? If you found this episode helpful, that's awesome. I'm so glad. Is there a friend you can share it with? That would be awesome as well. You can always subscribe on your podcast app. Music by XSS. Hang out with me on STEMdenity at Instagram. I'm trying to spend a little bit less time on social media. Nowadays, as part of this kind of mental health conversation, I've realized that I'm very distractible, and things like Instagram are, obviously designed to kind of suck you in and give you tons of information in a very, very short amount of time. And that's actually been really hard on me, and spending a lot more time off of Instagram and being very intentional when I go on there, interacting in a very thoughtful way has really helped my relationship with social media. But I'm still there and I'd love to hear from you. If you have other topics you would like me to talk about, please reach out. You can reach out through social media, Instagram. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Anna Hodshire. Let me know what you're thinking. And I will see you next week for our second part of this interview.